Okay. So looking at the agenda real quick, we've gone through introductions. We want to just talk a little bit about where we're at with the rulemaking process and CPUC. I want to talk about regional strategies that we're looking at and some things that are happening there, and some areas that we're looking to do some piloting of processes within our communities, and then close it out with the roundtable. Give all of you folks some time to do your updates. And so I'm going to move forward. I ran across this last mile broadband fact sheet on the CPUC website. And what's of particular interest is how it aligns with reporting for the CPUC. As you know, there's significant funding that the governor's put aside, and they're working on how they're going to administer those funds. It all appears, a lot of it, preponderance of it appears to be flowing through the Public Utilities Commission. Our funding comes from the Public Utilities Commission, and so we feel we have this role to provide this information, but also help cities, municipalities, counties be ready to apply for these grants and have a game plan. And when they finally do have the rules and we do go pursue the money, we're all doing it together in a way that makes sense for all of us at the local level. So the statewide middle mile network, I believe that group is meeting today, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we get into the pilots of the middle mile network. I'm going to write, there's George Amendola. He just joined us.
Good morning, everyone.
The last mile grant program, that's going to be fascinating to see what that is, how that works, whether we're going neighborhood by neighborhood, community by community, how that works. We have ideas. We have pilots about how we can engage with social equity partners and communities in need, and really go in and provide some digital literacy assistance in terms of getting those grants and that funding. And so that'll be fascinating to see when they first release it. In the last report I heard from CPUC, they were looking at the technical assistant grants and then the last mile program. And we were looking at a timeline where in the next 30, 60, 90 days, you'd start seeing the rules and the application window start to open for these. The last one being the consortia program, re-upping our funding, which would be probably not till the end of next year. It's really the last priority, if you will. Right now, getting money to the municipalities is in dealing with the last mile grant programs and the technical assistance to municipalities. That appears to be where the priority is, and rightly so. And so just wanted to pass this information on to you. Sasha, when he puts out this next Monday missive, we'll probably link this to you, and so you can see what this latest brochure is from CPUC about all that's going on. To that end, however, moving on to the next slide, I wanted to put this is kind of where we're really wanting to focus time and attention on the regional picture, the county-wide picture. And this was put together for the county of Santa Barbara. And what we're basically doing is focusing on the conversations, focusing on the convenings that we can have. This is all high level. I would not even begin to say that this was anything to do with design and engineering. It's not. But it is about engaging a conversation in a meaningful way. I'll tell you, and I've told you this group in the past, communications of what broadband is a tall mountain to climb. And I was talking to Goleta City Council the other night, and once again, you go through a presentation. Monica, you and I mentioned this yesterday. You know, you go through a presentation, you're talking to council members, and you start talking about middle mile and last mile, and you know, all of these terms about technologies, and they say, I don't understand what broadband is. And so if you have to overcome just the conversation, you know, and creating this awareness of how we're talking about infrastructure and capacity, and there's lightning rods, you know, 5G or whatever. I mean, there's certain things that you could easily go down a rabbit hole and go without and lose sight of the whole conversation of what broadband is and the need for capacity, you know, throughout the community for all kinds of technology. And so how to have that conversation and enlighten folks and do it in bite-sized bits where eventually everybody's on the same page with the same level of understanding. That's going to be a heck of a challenge as we talk to each of the municipalities and stakeholders throughout. And so the conversation really does focus on the regional middle mile, municipal middle mile, last mile, and the municipalities and the providers. I sense that, we're going to do a lot more speed dating, if you will, where we have the providers meet with municipality folks. You do this day in and day out, but if we can do it together for a common vision, a common goal, that's going to be great. In the Santa Barbara County area, we've got UCSB on board wanting to be a part of this, in the economic forecast. So that's going to be some interesting data that they provide. The Santa Barbara County Community Foundation has got their own sets of data, and we're going to be wanting to do that. And then based on holes, we're going to want to validate certain kinds of data, and we'll see how that all plays out and what data we're missing. Eventually, I do believe a lot of the funding that we have is going to be geared towards going in dealing with the data issues, and data issues are large. There is no one source, if you will, where all of the broadband data and knowledge in terms of capacity, subscriptions, all of this stuff has been pulled together. We're going to have to be working on a continuous basis. And then the digital inclusion piece, where are those communities in need, and how do you define and quantify that need? And so as we gather this information, there's going to be certain outcomes. The one particular outcome of importance to me is that every municipality has a portfolio of applications that when the rulemaking is done and the funds have arrived, they can submit. That is the purpose of all this, is that no communities miss this window, miss this opportunity to transform, that they know the areas that are critical within their community, that they know they have some basic idea of what a community network might need or might want, but they have a game plan to ask for funds, and so yes, we'll have some kind of a strategy. Is maybe it is, or maybe it's not the right word. But it's an action plan. It's a roadmap to be able to say, this is what we want. This is where we're going. This is what we're going to need, and they can turn that into applications for funding, and they'll have opportunities to the partnerships that are going to be there, the telecoms that exist, as well as the other organizations there in terms of how that they're going to approach this situation. And so I put the emphasis and the value of a consortia in this role as a convener, and to focus in on the funds that are heading this direction, and to try to leave the region with a game plan on how to apply for those funds. It's not our plan as much as it's a municipality's plan, and they'll have the funds will come to them. And, they're the ones that are going to be building their future, and so that's how we're moving forward with this. Any discussions about this before we move on?
Actually, I just got on the Moore Park side, and I want to give a shout out to Jory and his team at Magellan for their funding webinar on the funding that has been kind of shared that you displayed on the PUC slide.
Yes.
I look at everything through a Moore Park lens, of course, and with one exception, what we're looking at for our project is essentially the funding groups are saying, well, Moore Park, it's not you, it's me. We're just looking for a city that's a little more rural or a little more unserved. So the direct funding is probably not a good option for us. The one that is potentially interesting is that loan loss reserve fund. But that does, carry with it that to use that, it means you're borrowing money. And that's a policy decision that our council is going to have to make, that are you willing to front, potentially millions of dollars and borrow it without 100% certainty that you're going to get an ROI back on that. And so we're also anxiously waiting to see the new infrastructure bill and how that money will flow. And we'll certainly be taking a look at that.
Yeah, I had an interesting conversation with the city of Goleta night before last, and similar in that they said, we've got a university, we've got high-tech companies, we're pretty urban. I mean, along the 101 there, and don't know why we would want to do this. Why do we need this? We're in pretty good shape overall, and it's not 100%, but it's better than most, and there is a point to all of that. At the same time, as the conversation unfolds and you start talking about the funds that are available, and you brought up a great point about the loan loss fund. I mean, that's where you're at today. Is that where you want to be at tomorrow? Do you know where you want to be at tomorrow? Do you want to be part of that conversation about where you're going to be at tomorrow? Can we talk about a community network? Can we talk about, linking rural, they just had a fire up the road, up the 101, and do you have, redundant backbone, if you will, into your community? There's all kinds of pieces and parts to this conversation that it would make sense to have to be aware of and come up with a game plan. Some cities may choose to treat this like a city operated utility. Others may want a P3 partnership. Every community will come up with a different game plan. So it's all interesting. And Terry Theobald just joined us. And so he can talk about some of this as well as we get into this and give us an update. Moving on to the next slide. I thought we'd talk about middle mile networks a little bit. This is the one, and Jory and Terry can provide us the latest. I believe there's a middle mile advisory meeting this morning. Two interesting things I will mention. First off, let me throw up this slide. Many people may have seen, this is accessible on our website. This was the state of California's proposed middle mile solution, and we've provided some pretty good feedback to everybody that their idea and definition of middle mile is very different than ours. It's not, they have, as you get into Ventura County, you see that there's just not all cities are connected. There's not, they have legs, if you will, that are, if they're cut off, you're cut off. There's no redundancy. It's not a network per se. It's just a connecting of the dots, literally, in terms of unserved households is what designed this network. So that's interesting, and that's where the conversation's at the state level. This last week, there was a meeting that we attended, and then there was a release of some information yesterday. And these are pilot projects for that network. And there is one, and Paul, you'll have to take a look at it. It's right here. This, I believe it's item 13. Goes to New Cuyama to somewhere. The state, I guess, actually is planning on funding a leg here in advance of the other notification we got with Frontier. But these are, I think there's 18 of these projects, and this is the announcement was made yesterday. This is where that middle mile, statewide middle mile network is going to start with these projects. What the rhyme and reason is, where these things came from. The presentation I heard, they said that this is what CPUC had recommended to them. I don't know the basis of that, but the announcement's been made. These are projects. And the other thing that's interesting about this is I believe they're all along Caltrans right-of-ways. And Caltrans will be doing the builds, if I'm not mistaken. So, Jory, Terry, do you know any more about this than I do, other than the announcement's been made and this is the map?
I'll let Terry go first.
As soon as I find out how to turn off mute, I can go first. Yeah, I have a lot of opinions about this, but I was in the same meeting Bill and Jory were in, and I heard the same thing. I've speculated because my management wants to know what's going on and why isn't anything in Ventura happening. So I think they needed to do something right away. Because they had all this money hanging out there and nothing had started yet. So they needed to fix something to get going. What I don't know is if they're going to do these first and then move on to another set, or if they just put these out here so they could start digging here while they work on planning for the next group. I'm not clear. But Bill, can you roll the thing down a little bit and go down into the San Diego region? So what I find interesting about this map is the amount of effort being put into project 18. And San Diego has done a boatload of lobbying and information gathering. They've documented their neighborhoods. They've figured out where they have broadband that works, where they have broadband that doesn't work, where their disadvantaged areas are. They've got all the stats. They've got all of this documented. They got the GIS maps laid out. They were part of this SCAG group that I was working with, that had brought the 7 counties together. But that digital divide group consisted of SCAG and SANDAG. And SANDAG typically had something to say about it. And when it came time after the CPUC made the announcements, some people like Ventura relied on SCAG, who had sought out and obtained formal standing with the CPUC. We relied on their comments, where SANDAG used their attorneys to create their own formal standing with CPUC so they could make their own comments. And I was a little concerned about that, because I didn't think Ventura County should be trying to lobby for its own efforts while we were trying to get the attention for all 7 Southern California counties. But I believe what happened here is SCAG did do that. And I believe that's part and parcel to why Project 18 is so significant. So what I've told my management is, there is no rhyme or reason, but I believe lobbying efforts by at least one organization made a difference. And I also told them that I think we need to see what the schedule looks like for this. So if they're going to do this first, and then after they get this done, start working on the next pile, it's going to be years before they get around to dealing with an area that we were interested in. We need to address that somehow. So those are my comments on this subject. So thanks, Bill. Jory, go ahead.
Thank you, Terry. My comments are very similar to Terry's. These areas were identified through various sources of input to the CPUC and also to CNIC. There was some outreach that was conducted by the CNIC group. They did reach out to many communities, as I've heard, and actually participated in on a couple of them on those calls. And it appeared that they were hunting for these initial projects. They weren't clear on how many there would be initially. We now know that there are 18. It appears that these are the first round of identified project areas, and that there will be another round of areas that will also be initial or identified as early project areas, but it's still, like Terry said, yet to be determined when that's going to take place. I have heard that it's going to happen before these areas are constructed. Don't know if it means that they're starting construction or fully constructed, but that these other areas will be identified. And then we'll see more of this happening in a phased approach over time. Back to why Ventura is not included in this. I agree with Terry on his assessment. I also believe that it was really the availability of data and information, because what was made clear to me in all those conversations was we have to make sure that we're going after low-hanging fruit, was the term used. And we've all heard that term before. And in this case, low-hanging fruit is unserved or underserved communities, and they were going after the federal standard of 25.3. How that data was assessed is unclear. The method by which they did this was not public, was not as transparent as I think a lot of people would have liked it to see it be. But on the other hand, you know, this is the first round. It's good news that the state is moving forward, and they're moving forward quickly. Many of us are a little surprised that they've actually been able to get this far so quickly, and we hope they keep up the pace.
Yeah.
Bill, this is Paul. The 13 looks like it's from right around Taft to Cuyama or New Cuyama.
That's exactly where it is.
Yeah, there's not enough detail there, but that's what it looks like.
No, but that's I read it yesterday when I was looking looking at the legend, there is a companion document that has the actual description. It is from Taft to New Cuyama. And so it's all interesting. I mean, and I'll mention, in fact, if you haven't seen it already, we've been talking about Cuyama for years at this point. And this last Friday, we got the announcement that the resolution has been approved, or at least the staff recommendation. It will be going before the CPUC December 16th for formal approval. It's about 12.5 million to take fiber from Cuyama down the hill into Santa Maria. And so I didn't put the picture of the North County fiber ring that we've been talking about up here, but that is a key leg to the northern Santa Barbara County area. I think the total build is that they're talking about 88 miles of fiber.
Yeah, it's from Maricopa to Santa
Yes.
Maria.
Going right through your community. Yeah.
That's the middle mile, and then there's another part of it that goes. The last mile goes up to from Old Cuyama up through Vinacopa, up to 33.
So Cuyama's really kind of unique in that it borders all three counties of San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and Ventura. And so it's really interesting that we've been taking that message for years to take care of this problem. And we're finally getting the funds assigned to do that. And so it was good news, Paul.
Yeah, outstanding news.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it'll probably take another year and a half before you actually see the end work result, and that's probably being fast. But it's great to know it's on its way, and with some specificity and funding and support.
Well, I appreciate the support. I know the Broadband Consortium put a support letter in, as did other agencies. So,
well, in talking with the supervisors up there, I mean, they're all been aware and rallying for it. So I think it's all good. Terry, you want to talk at all about where we're at with the Ventura County Middle Mile Network? Your latest thinking and thoughts in terms of next steps?
So am I still on?
Yep.
So I'm just going to say a couple of words because honestly, I'm not sure how this is going to pan out. So first of all, Bill was able to arrange a meeting with Louis Fox with Scenic. So we were able to talk to them about their new administrative role and how that will play out for them. And they asked kind of what we were up to. And I think we received some good feedback from them. We have Sonny McPeak, who's a significant force on the Digital Divide Group, who's also interested in providing some assistance or direction, I guess. And then working with Magellan, we have started targeting some grants, some smaller grants. And then my final point, which will probably be news to everybody except Brian Palmer if he's on here, is we're now looking at making some kind. I'm looking into seeing if we can make some kind of an investment through some funding that might be available to my organization that would allow us to demonstrate that we're serious about this. If we can establish any amount of funding that would allow us to start doing some work, that would, and if we're going to start with the 126, and that would allow us to restart our discussions with the Transportation Commission on obtaining the right of way that we're looking for there. And so those are the four things that we're looking at or working with different folks on right now, but none of them is far enough along to really comment more than these are conversations of interest to be fleshed out more.
Bill, I don't have anything to add to what Terry said.
I just might add that, and you, Jory, you might want to comment as well. Looking at the federal funding and the recently passed infrastructure funding bill, it looks like a lot of that funding is going to end up with NTIA. It looked like, the way I read it, there is some middle mile work there. There's going to be some last mile work there. But that's how we're going to get to it, is by, I don't think you're going to see that. I think we had talked about maybe 100 million is what you're hearing about that's going to actually hit the state. It seems like the preponderance, the billions themselves will be through NTIA in terms of how those funds are distributed. And so once again, the qualifications, the criteria, the focus areas, that's all yet to be, worked out and designed.
It's going to be interesting to see. I agree with you, Bill. It looks like all the print that I've seen is all leaning toward the NTIA governing this. And managing the allocations. I'm a little concerned myself, only from the standpoint that NTIA is getting a new boss. NTIA was recently, given the responsibility for the tribal loans and the rural grant programs, which was really overwhelmed them considerably. I believe that they're coming out of that, but they still have a lot of catching up to do because of that added work that I don't believe, no one in the industry believes that they were fully prepared for. And now the question is, how are they going to ramp up for this next infrastructure effort?
Yeah. So I mentioned Terry on an email earlier that I sat next to Mike Pettit at yesterday's Civic Alliance meeting as they were rolling out their annual report. Thank you, Monica, AT&T, for sponsoring that event. It was a great event. But I was talking about Santa Barbara County and these tranches of funds that are heading in our direction, and saying, regardless, the ability to get all of the municipalities lined up, ready, in talking together and aware is vital. And so, to Brian's point, the Moore Park perspective is uniquely Moore Parks. At the same time, if we can find each of the municipalities' unique perspective in the same way, and everybody is applying to the same source in the same manner, and middle mile discussions are occurring where the communities are going to be integrated with each other, that's a great way to get ready. But even what we're also finding out is the secret to this is lobbying. If you have a whole package as a region, and you're aware of the portfolio of each of the municipalities, and you're aware of what the region needs from a middle mile perspective, and you've got everybody lined up. I mean, if there's a force to be reckoned with, it's going to be an entire region, or 3 regions for that matter, to really attract attention and send that message that this place has its act together. We need your support. And so far, what I think I'm concerned about is that everybody is aware, but they're going their own way. And I think that there is going to be strength in numbers and some degree of unity that we should try to strive for into how we approach these things.
Bill, I think you bring up a very good point, and that especially not only for governance, but also for looking to obtain grant funds. The county right now is in the process of hiring Magellan and a grant writing company, and we're going to be going after 2 specific grants initially. One being the EDA Economic Adjustment Grant, and the other one being the Capital Projects Grant. The state of California was allocated $540 million from the feds for the Capital Projects Grants. And we believe that grant program has a lot of viability, and the county is eligible for that, for building out the first segments of the middle mile network. And also we feel the same for the EDA Economic Adjustment Grants for economic recovery as a result of COVID, the creation of long-term lasting jobs. But the point you bring up is very key, because when we do engage in these grant efforts for building out these first segments, we're going to need a tremendous amount of support. And it's going to be letters of support from the cities, obviously from legislators, from state officials, from our congressional districts, and also other stakeholders, large employers, utilities, and the like. So it's very important that we hold together and that we support one another in this effort, because the grant funding process does look for that and does look for an organized and regional approach, not necessarily just specific to one community when it comes to getting funding for middle mile.
And Moorpark will be happy to provide that support letter for any Ventura County project, especially those, under the county banner. So of course, our preference is that you go first with the 118 corridor, but we understand that there are reasons that the 126 is more desirable. But I'll gladly write that letter with our mayor's signature on it in support of any of those grant applications.
Yeah.
So Bill, one of the things that I was of particular interest in the Sandag effort. They have I'm going to call it a dedicated team, 5-6 people. That's all they do, is they do this. They collect data, they document, they lobby, they got their lawyers on it. If we're going to start to try and coordinate, how are you thinking that we're all going to sort of left hand this thing? And with enough left hands doing it, we'll come up with enough concentrated resources that we can work on this? Or I guess what did Santa Barbara do? How did they make this work where they were able to get everybody together without some sort of a central focused team that was their primary mission in life for some period of time?
Well, I think they're going to pay the consortia to be that team. The county themselves took 200,000 out of ARPA funds, and then SBCAG, which is the equivalent to VCTC, has rounded up. They're going to be the group that's providing the oversight. So the county is part, and they're constructed just like VCTC. They've got the county board, they've got city reps, and that is their board. And SBCAG took the initial investment from the supervisors and said, okay, here's 200, why don't we match it from the cities? And all the city reps without pause said, okay, we're in. And so now we've been going to each of the cities, making the same pitch that we made to the supervisors. And it ranges from, and they've matched it. SBCAG will end up with 100,000. They're going to be, basically providing oversight to the consortia and how we choose to execute this. And they're going to be the project team. They've got a couple of folks that are going to be part of it, as part of their organization. And then we're going to be the arms and legs and the advocates and conveners and working with industry, to be the partners to pull it all together with our expertise. And I think that we kind of took a left turn. I mean, how we got there, it's amazing. Reach went out and started the conversation as a group. And then when the conversation moved from the what to the how, they said, well, gee, the only people that really know this space are the consortium. I mean, they've been doing it since 2014. And so I think we got there by default. I'm happy to have been invited there, but at the same time, it's not something that occurred to me that it was even a possibility. And yeah, if you look statewide to all the consortia, I mean, we're all faced with this in the discussion about how do we reinvent ourselves. And that appears to be something that's happening. A big part of our role, I believe, is to help SBCAG understand this space. They do understand the roads that they provide oversight, transportation. Their big project, obviously, right now that they're doing locally is the 101 corridor widening up there in Santa Barbara County. But what does it mean to provide oversight to middle mile fiber? And what strands are they going to be doing it, and how will they be doing that? And I think that's something they're going to be. That's a role that they're going to want to take on. The relationship of the physical highways is going to be similar to the relationship of virtual highways, recognizing each municipality municipality has its own space and it's going to do its own thing for the last mile, and it'll be unique to each municipality. You're still going to need to have the road up to Cuyama and you know, and all of these middle mile legs that you're going to want to make sure that there's capacity as well as, you know, access for all providers into these communities. And so I think that you'll see, whether it's VCTC, I mean, I think SLOCAG is the way they call it. It's up in San Luis Obispo County. They're watching what's happening in Santa Barbara and expressing an interest to follow in those footsteps as well. So
just so I'm clear on what I thought I heard it said related to Santa Barbara. So Santa Barbara County allocated $200,000 from their ARPA funds to help fund the arms and legs that will do some of the lifting on this, correct?
Correct.
And then the consortium or the county went to the municipalities or the other stakeholders and they matched the $200,000.
yes.
So then they probably have $1 million, $2 million that they can fund the consortium or
No.
or other people.
No, it's 400,000,
Okay.
200 from the county and 200 from municipalities. And in municipalities, yeah, in municipalities, Goleta, you know, in talking to Goleta the other night, I think their bill is about 20,000, you know, and they basically said, for the value proposition, we can't afford not to. You know, this is not you know, it's the ask of small towns is not significant, you know, and you really do want to be part of that regional conversation. And, you know, if it cannot be at the table, doesn't make a lot of sense. And so, and frankly, if I was asking myself as a consortium, I think there'd be, you know, a microphone drop. I think they'd yawn. I don't think that we necessarily have what it would take to get the job done. I mean, heck, we've been trying it since 2014, you know, but when I follow Margie Kern, who's the SB CAG director, at all of these city council meetings and provide technical backup. She's the one asking, she's the one making the case. She's the one that says, I got spirit, how about you?
Right. And
then I basically end up providing technical support. You know, I show pictures like this and talk about middle mile and it's important. So they're doing all the fundraising themselves.
right. So what I think the clarification was that all of the municipalities combined matched the number that the county put in.
Yeah, and it's a factor of population. You know, they just feel like that seems to be the fair number to choose what proportion we pay for each municipality.
Right. Well, that's an interesting idea, because my organization could do something similar and probably at a larger number. Again, you know, I think that there's nobody at the county whose full-time job it is to do broadband, but this is not a left-hand job either. I mean, if we're going to effectively compete with other entities in the state for access to the state's project, or if we're going to, I mean, to me, that's almost as much effort as it would be for us to go get our own funding and then do our own thing. We're going to need to create basically a project team that's dedicated to do this, right? And that means we're going to be paying people to do it. I was interested because it sounds like that's where Santa Barbara's going. That maybe that's where Mike Pettit thinks we should be going, but I'm not sure how to do that without maybe it's not 100% dedicated, but certainly more dedicated than as a whole we seem to stand today. Because what we should have done is what SCAG did is find an attorney, whether that's the county attorney or the consortium attorney, or heck, even a Magellan attorney, and obtained formal standing with the CPUC. And then we should have lobbied for Ventura County. We could talk about we were part of SCAG, but we should have lobbied for Ventura County, and then we could have almost mirrored what Sandag did in terms of their presentations. I mean, I think we have all the information. We just didn't put it together like they did.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, well, that's a interesting thought that we need to factor into those other thoughts that we've started to consider.
Yep.
I think the place to have that conversation in terms of getting funding from the joint funding from the county and the other cities is the Ventura County City Managers Group. So whether it's Mike Powers on the county side who initiates that conversation and discussion to kind of see the willingness, or I believe Alex Wynn of Oxnard is still chairing that. So Oxnard being a champion, in the region for broadband issues, may want to bring it up, that way to the group and get a feel for what or if there's a consensus about what to do and the commitment of funding.
Yeah, that's exactly what Mike had suggested yesterday, is that, based on this, he would want to take it to that group. And he needed to he wanted the documents that Santa Barbara's using. That's exactly what SB CAG did too, is before they got the vote of their reps, they took it to the city managers group up in Santa Barbara County and got all the city managers on board and said, we're going to do this. And the reps voted yes, and the city managers were on board. And I mean, it's on autopilot from that point on.
Bill, wondering how this was positioned in Santa Barbara. Was it based on a needs assessment? Was it based on economic development? Was it based on creating jobs? How did they justify each city making the investment?
I think that's a good question, and I don't have. I can speculate. I don't think I have a good answer. I know that Reach made the ask originally, from an economic development standpoint. I know that, and it was just because there was a call out for requests for ARPA funding, and when we actually got to the hearing where they were going through the ARPA funding, this was almost like a consent agenda. I mean, they're putting out millions here and millions there. I mean, and they even waste time talking about 200K in the context of all the ARPA funding was we weren't even, they did line up about, an hour presentation several weeks prior to the ARPA hearing. But when the hearing came up, they didn't even want to talk about it because there were such bigger things going on ARPA-wise, if you will. Economic development is where Reach was approaching them, but a lot of it falls in the category of we don't know what we don't know. It really said, here is all the funding. There's going to be a second round of ARPA funding. There's going to be all of this state funding. It kind of coincided with what the governor was doing, and he's sending, the funds to Sacramento. It was coinciding with the infrastructure bill. There's all this other funding. Does anybody have a clue of what we should be applying for, what we're going to do about it, how we're going to do this or that? And so they really wanted to build a narrative, an understanding of here's where we're at, here's what we need, here's where we're going to go, here's how we're going to do it together. And so I want to emphasize it's to say we're going to go off and do an asset inventory. No, I don't think we could even touch the surface of, of getting down into the design engineering and, in the whole thing. But we can certainly talk about processes and priorities. And that, I think, is knowing the low-hanging fruit, if you will, because a lot of that is already known by the communities, coming up with a game plan to work together and how we'll continue to work together, and getting everybody ready to fill out the forms required by CPUC and NTIA and others. I think we can be a good, responsible coach and counselor and provide status updates and do the kinds of things we've been doing here, but do it on a much bigger level. And so there's discussion about what does this look like? The group here is pretty much a Ventura County centric group. At the same time, we've always wanted to invite the folks in the north into this conversation, and occasionally they do drop in, but we're going to have a similar group, I'm sure, up there that's going to be unique to Santa Barbara County, and and we'll have a similar group up in SLO eventually when they're ready. That'll be unique to their particular strategy and in their particular communities. And I see countywide stakeholder groups taking shape. You've been doing it a long time. We certainly have a lot of interest and awareness now up in Santa Barbara County, and I think in the first part of January is when we'll have our first stakeholder meeting up there.
Great. I look at the middle mile network taking shape from the discussion, and the discussion's becoming very robust, especially with the prospect of funding. Great leadership by Terry Thibault and the County of Ventura. An essential component to all of this is the last mile connection with each of our municipalities. And, I think that those decisions are largely, driven by political will. And, the political will needs to be justified to support staff's recommendations. It seems to be a missing component from, how this has taken a twist with the idea of funding. There still needs to be a political driver.
Yep. I'm getting to know Monica Gibbs pretty well. She and I travel the same ground, and Monica, you work both San Luis Obispo counties, Santa Barbara counties, and Ventura County, and each of these counties are so different from one another. It really is fascinating to watch the differences, and to see how they're coming up with their own solutions, their own way. It's fascinating. So. We got to do what we got to do down here in Ventura County, but you got to also respect and learn from what other folks are doing as well. Any thoughts, Monica?
I commend you for, spreading yourself as well. And consortium, putting yourself in both, wearing both hats, because it is a lot of work. So. Yeah.
And Tim Williams does the same. I mean, he's up and down the coast like nobody's business, and from Santa Paula all the way up into SLO. And so it's what, Tim, you have any thoughts about how things are progressing?
Yeah, well, nothing huge. I appreciate the conversation, and I love that the city and the county, it looks like, is really looking at opportunities for this. I think I agree, we're learning from other areas on how to attack this, but nothing concrete or anything to add too major, that's too much different than we've talked about, but we're eagerly looking at these opportunities as well, because there's a high hurdle to get to, and construction costs for underground especially have really gone up. They're almost double what they were a couple of years ago. And so when we're looking at these projects from either a competitive perspective, like we look at them, or a regional government perspective, somehow we have to lower that hurdle. And so I think these are the things that might help make that happen. So.
Good point. I'm going to run through the next couple of slides, and then we'll pause at the last slide.
Actually, Bill, can I comment? Tim, I think you make a very good point. We're all watching what is going on with broadband and broadband funding, and because there's been such an increase in not only an increase in the demand for broadband, the demand for broadband materials, all the related equipment. I mean, we've seen projects in the 4 states that I work in where we're running out of materials, and especially because of just supply disruptions, project costs are going up significantly. We're watching this very carefully. And I'm sure your engineering team is as well, to see how this is going to be inflating broadband budgets now that there's such a demand.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And those budgets which were set aside just a year ago or even 6 months ago, a year ago to maybe 8 months ago, are probably being reconsidered.
Yeah, we're seeing the exact same thing, Jory. Yeah. And I would say our engineering team's done a great job. We've got about 18 months of product, but we don't have anything beyond that, so we're doing okay for our current needs, but in the short term, but hopefully if this doesn't get resolved in the next 10 to 18 to 24 months, we could be having trouble into 2023, 24, even when this money is out there and able to be spent.
Yeah, very good point. Thanks for bringing that up. Back to you, Bill. Sorry.
Sorry about that. I didn't mute. Okay, two slides. Just be aware that when we talk strategies, what I'm hoping that we're doing is lining up our ducks. The real proof of the pudding is going to be in the funds that follow. And so I'm also feeling urgency to push these pilots that actually look at a pilot for middle mile in terms of, and position ourselves in a pilot is one. To do the last mile discussion, certain communities, Santa Paula is a good community, Guadalupe is a good community, Oxnard's a good community, but any place where we can find communities in which we can look at, there are established needs, we're aware of these needs, there's going to be opportunities for social equity work to be done with those kinds of partners, digital literacy services and training to be delivered. I mean, I was listening to the Comcast Internet Essentials National Symposium yesterday, their impact segment. And when you go into these communities and you provide somebody with a connection and you provide somebody with the training, how transformational that is to people's lives. I mean, they're really doing a good job in communicating the fact that this is transformational. This is going to change people's lives. And that's what's calling us into these communities. And we have to take that message forward. And Terry has been looking, closely, at El Rio and some of the communities in the county and unincorporated areas. And, I think if we could conduct pilots and show people that here's how you go in there, here's how you do the mapping, here's how you partner with the organizations that are already embedded in there, and here's how you get outcomes, and before and after outcomes will measure the progress that you make. I mean, that's what's desired. And so continue to look for opportunities to find some funding to go demonstrate these ideas. I think this is a time where best practices are being established, and we can establish them ourselves. We can learn from what the work other people are doing and be informed. But this is a good space. In a similar manner, the Coastal Trident exercise that we've wrapped up this last year from an innovation standpoint. Alan Yeager's with us with the Navy. He's the catalyst, if you will, the glue that holds all of this information together. We're looking at things like robotics, unmanned systems and drones, mixed reality environments. And we're always talking about what's the smart city going to look like and what kinds of technologies are going to be part of it. And so these are not tied to CPUC or federal funding sources today, but they're very important conversations. And, I appreciate people like, Brian and Kevin, and others that, from the cities that are waiting, watching, hoping, talking, letting us be, serving sounding boards for this conversation. And so Alan and I have been having conversations every week trying to figure out, okay, we've got an exercise that's going to be occurring in the spring of next year. Can we create a smart city test bed, if you will, of certain technologies? If they're dealing with robotics with Naval Facilities Command that are going to go be cleaning, oil tanks, and they are, in crawlers, can we use them for, hazardous waste and other kinds of applications? And so time we can dual use. We're very gifted here in Ventura County to have the Navy Facilities Command, which is about heating, ventilation, air conditioning, environment, a lot of city kinds of needs. They're looking at technologies. If we can dual use that stuff and use it as a catalyst for smart city development, we want to. And so just previews of coming attractions. Greg Hayward has been he looked like he dropped off. He's been a real advocate and participant with his trackable health and the sensors that he's doing, and a lot of the expert systems work that he's got in his product that he's developing. And so looking forward to continuing this conversation. So hopefully we'll have some more information about this in the next month, and having a very, very active program and some real interesting, ideally in the spring, summer, no later than the fall next year, have a smart city tech symposium demonstrating the technologies that we were able to test and exercise. One of the technologies, a company called PicoGrid, dealt with early warning fire prevention. And in particular, where we were going with the city of Oxnard and Ventura was some of the fires we've been having in the homeless encampments down in the Santa Clara River. And if we can work with the fire protection areas, firefighters, first responders in providing eyes on and getting involved to be able to head that off at the past, certainly would be a good thing to do. So just examples of other conversations currently happening as well. So this is our wrap, if you will. We'd love to hear from city reps and telecoms, everybody. If there's any updates that you want to provide that we haven't talked about that you'd be comfortable sharing, this would be a great time to do that. Mike, welcome.
Well, good morning. It's great to be here. I do have some updates on what's going on in the city of Ventura. We were kind of treading water with sci-fi, but it looks like we will finally kill that deal officially. Really not much progress has been going on, and council certainly feels that we're heading into our goal setting session. And in our preliminary goal setting, broadband came up a number of times. And I was talking with George Amendola about some of these things, and I realized that we kind of have a gap right now in who on our staff would be the right person to take point on this. And so that's why I'm here right now. But I hope to continue to stay involved with this group and hope that finally Ventura can make some progress on something that has been a priority for 20 years. So it's good to see everybody. And I look forward to working with everyone. Thank you for having me.
Mike, we really appreciate your advocacy, and it really, Chong will talk about the Moore Park story. When you get somebody on the council level that's an advocate, it's amazing what doors can be knocked down and, bridges built and opportunities occur to have that kind of leadership. And just welcome. We're so happy that you're here. Speaking of, Brian, you want to give an update?
Sure. Well, I want to say I'm glad Ventura is come to Jesus moment, if you will, with sci-fi. I think that's definitely a step in the right direction. As far as updates go, we have finished the research arm of our market study for our Meet Me room. I have not advised my council yet of any of the preliminary findings, and of course it's still being written up by Jory and his team, but just kind of the one sentence version is it's going to be go big or go home. And, with that comes a little more added, well, not a little more, but a lot more added risk. So, our policymakers will have information available to them, but it is going to be, if you build it, will they come? And you're never going to get to 99 or 100% certainty. So there is a significant policy decision that will need to be made in the near future here in Moore Park. Also, just a little tip to Mike, as you guys go through it, just get a really good project manager who has a regional thought, because this is not something that any of us have to do alone, and us all helping each other. Kevin, as an example, has been invaluable to us here in Moore Park to get things done, and I'd like to hope that it's reciprocal as well, that we've helped them out. So that's my tip there.
Kevin, any thoughts from your standpoint in Oxnard?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Brian, and welcome, Mike. And great to see you on here. We've all been talking with Mitchell, as we all have, and trying to drive partnership there between our cities. And thanks, Brian, for mentioning that. And I guess, yeah, it is exciting to be part of this conversation and to be part of what's going on here and making our county first and foremost and competitive with this resource. We did have a new CIO start a couple of weeks ago. She's in her second week. We've already had some conversations about fiber. So I do hope we'll be lining up now with getting some more momentum back, moving forward on a lot of our projects. Good news is we did get 4 bills approved with some ARPA money, and to the points that were made about availability of resources, there's literally 100 and something public works projects in queue, and getting these projects up to the top of the funnel and having resources to get stuff done is just it is going to be a challenge outside of just the resources and materials we need to build. So that is a challenge, and I think moving quickly is something that is certainly we're going to try and do and hopefully do together. And just would reiterate again, Brian, thank you for saying that. Your sharing of information, and the more we can help each other as we walk through this. It's just been a great community to be a part of. Jory's help to us, and again, Brian's help, and Bill, your help, and it's really been a great team effort. And so to that point too, I've written a couple of briefs for our management about the various state funding and federal funding that's available and how we might apply it. Happy to share that with anybody that's interested. So just happy to be part of the conversation and hopefully getting the vehicle back on the road quickly and up to highway speeds again pretty quick.
Yeah. I think, Brian, you had a shout out, if I recall, for Jory and, you know, this webinar we had in which he provided all those funding sources. I think that we're going to probably want to see if we could get updates almost quarterly. You know, every time we find out new updates from new sources, we ought to, you know, refresh that data, and that data is available, and we can certainly make it available again. But we owe a debt of gratitude to Jory and Magellan, and, you know, providing us with that and sharing that openly, and really appreciate that. Nikki, is anything you want to talk about, anything from Santa Paula by chance?
Hi, sure. Yeah, so we, since I started in August, we have met once with our broadband committee here in town, and it's just an ad hoc committee. But we made some progress. The meeting was about 2 weeks ago. We made some progress in terms of the county's plan. So I built out a map that shows our kind of anchor institutions in Santa Paula and what we want to be connected once the county line comes through, and just kind of figuring out where we want our pool boxes to be when the line's there, so where we want to branch out from. And I shared that with two of our council members who are on the committee, and then Jonathan, of course, and a few others. And then now I'm doing some community outreach. So I actually just finished a survey. I talked to 50 different residents in Santa Paula to figure out kind of who their internet service provider is, what their satisfaction is, what their speeds they're getting, what the costs they're paying, and just kind of any other thoughts that they have on that, just to kind of figure out, you know, we kind of know what the problems are, but just to kind of have that evidence to back it up, to be like, this is what people are actually saying. This is why broadband is such an important issue, and it needs to be a priority in Santa Paula and the county. And now I'm waiting to hear back from our school district to see if they have any data on internet access and equity and security during the remote learning period of the past 2 years. So that's just some additional stats that I'm hoping to get, just to kind of further support the need for broadband and broadband infrastructure, to see, you know, how many families had to check out hotspots, how many people couldn't pay their internet bill every month or express concerns about their kids being able to go to school remotely. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm working on, just some outreach stuff, some community statistics, just to see like what the status is in Santa Paula and how we can best prepare for the county's plan.
Wow, that's terrific. I wish I could bottle you up and pass you around. I mean, it's the stuff that you mentioned is so germane, and Jory may be nodding his head too, because yeah, I've been given a data request from SCAG and some of the work that Jory and I are doing for Southern California, and much of the stuff you're doing is what they're asking for. You know, this data doesn't exist, and it's so important in this last mile discussion, and you're gathering it, and it's exciting. I mean, I've got a group of, I think it's 50 different, you know, families for a focus group, and you're talking to them. I mean, you're doing it, and so I'm going to have to follow up and share with you what I'm trying to do, and you can see if perhaps some of the people you're talking to are people that we, the consortium, can take advantage of to inform work that Jory's trying to do analysis for the Southern California area. So this is exciting, and so happy that you're there doing that. And I know Terry, I'm speaking for Terry too, you know, the fact that the pool boxes and, you know, the discussion about when we come into town, what do you want, is a very, very important conversation. And it's just very, very exciting to see that you're working on it. That's great. Welcome. I mean, you've been here, but welcome.
Right, thank you.
You're really making a lot of good progress.
And Nikki, if you do a write-up for your ad hoc committee or something, especially on the data from the school district, if you could share that, that would be very helpful, because I don't know what our numbers are in context. So someone told me 13% of students, I don't know if that's going to be competitive for grants or not. So
Okay,
that would
yeah.
be super helpful if you wouldn't mind sharing that.
Yeah, for sure. I'll keep you updated. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
So much of this is I've got spirit. How about you? You know, and it's when we hear that kind of story, we really do want to be able to pass it on to the other cities as well, because it's a good news report. So I noticed Steve Sawyer joined us. Steve, welcome. So other than that,
sorry I joined late.
Yeah, no problem at all. We're just glad you're here. And we talked earlier with Lorja Orozco, and she says she's taking notes for you. So we're glad that
Great.
both of you are here.
And Bill, can I just ask a question of Nikki? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
When you're reaching out and doing the survey, are you informing residents of like the emergency broadband benefit program and
Good
other
question.
programs?
Yeah.
Or low cost or free internet?
Yeah, so I was going to bring that up and actually start like a little social media campaign for it. And we talked about it at a committee meeting. And I think a lot of our, like the council members expressed worry that people wouldn't be willing to give all the private information that's required to sign up for EBB. But I have some materials that I still want to share. And I did kind of tell people that it's a program that exists, but I think in Santa Paula, especially, people are hesitant to, post their social security number or submit it on an application, or they don't really know how to even fill out the application. So that's something that's still kind of on my mind, is doing some sort of campaign around that. But also the issue of EBB is like, we don't really know when it's going to end. So that's also a concern and kind of a time sensitive issue.
Exactly. I know the USC did a recent policy brief that outlined the lack of information or lack of knowledge by residents about these programs. So there hasn't been as much involvement in these programs as everybody would like to see. And I know that the county just recently instructed the ISD department, to engage in a more robust campaign to get the word out to the community about these different programs.
Yeah. The uptick hasn't been what people expected, and I think that there's work to be done in that area. Yeah. Paul Chunet, you have a Cuyama update, perhaps, besides the fact that you've been on the map recently and fiber's coming into town.
No. Other than that, there's nothing else to report.
Yeah.
Other than we still have issues. We still have kids working from home because it's optional here, and they don't have internet access, good internet access.
No,
I
think we're going to need to watch Nikki very closely, in that the work that she's doing is going to be very integral to the last mile, and your community in terms of last mile is going to be how we approach that. I mean, we're going to want to learn a lot about going door to door and interviewing these people in the community, and how to accelerate the connection as well as the programs available.
We use a third-party agency organization to do that, and it never looks, the utility going out and asking those questions never works well in this community, or most. And so we have a family resource center here that has a tremendous connection with the individual people, and they do all that stuff for us. They manage the low income programs and all that for PG&E and everything. They get the information for that, not us. So we don't go directly to them.
So when the funds come and you're part of the Santa Barbara County strategy, we're going to want to document that and make sure that we can pump some funding into that organization to do this work.
Yeah, it's and it's well known to the supervisors, because they have a monthly meeting for a community association, and supervisors attend that, or their reps. So
great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Updates from any of the other participants, providers, anybody? You're welcome to pass on any information.
Yeah, Bill, George Amendola here. Good morning again. Very encouraged by these discussions and the reports from various members of each city. It's really exciting to see the conversation evolve. A couple things which, again, I just want to emphasize is the last mile connectivity is the key to serving the underserved, or even the economic population, business communities, residential communities. I think that the driver to this is, can we realistically serve everyone, and strategically where those investments should be made? Is it in a local mile network that supports other points of access, i.e. 5G, LoRaWAN, MQTT messaging for IoT. Where will these investments best serve our communities? It's very exciting to hear that Santa Paula has created an ad hoc committee to drive this conversation within that city. I'm very encouraged to hear that. And, wondering if that would benefit any other city or municipalities as a model to help support staff and to support council and justify those decisions. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak right now. Appreciate it very much.
George, I think you're onto something because that's exactly what SBCAG did as well for the Santa Barbara discussion. They created their own ad hoc committee, and I think there were 2 supervisors and 3 city council members that were part of the broadband ad hoc committee, and they wanted to take a regional action. And so, yeah, you're right. Mike Johnson, coming from the Ventura City, he's a great voice, but he could use all the support and help from his peers as he possibly can, and other people, civic leaders within the community. An ad hoc committee is not a bad way to think about garnering up a critical mass of minds and thought leaders and moving this forward. Nice idea.
And if I may, I am Ventura's representative to VCOG, so I will look into what we can do with VCOG.
Bill, I have a general comment. I think this might be a good place to insert. Terry talked about what the county is doing, and you and I and Terry also spoke about what is happening within the region and what is happening with the 18 initial projects and how they got attention. And then we were all musing over, how we make the county's project more visible. I'd like to just add that this isn't just a county effort. This is all of us working in the same direction. You all, those of you who looked at the grant presentation that we gave earlier a couple weeks ago, really speaks to more the last mile than it does speak to the middle mile. And the more that we can promote what is going on within your communities, what is taking place, not just at the county for the middle mile, but the last mile, especially promoting the work that Nikki is doing in Santa Paula and what Brian is doing in Moore Park and what other, what Kevin is doing in Oxnard and what is taking place in Ventura. I think these are very important things to include in what we're going to do to promote the holistic county approach.
Totally. Yeah, totally agree.
And all of the cities should be looking very carefully at those grant opportunities, especially cities that can get data that shows that they're underserved, and those cities that have populations of less than 20,000. Especially look at Reconnect right now.
Yeah.
Jory, wondering if there's any correlation with any of these grant fundings and unserved with libraries. I know that's a conversation that comes up locally in Ventura quite often. Do you see any opportunities with that?
Libraries often work with school districts, and as such, they do gather data and commingle that data with the school districts, because libraries are a big source of handing out equipment, as well as school districts. And so they can provide counts. We know libraries are running out of equipment to loan out. We know that libraries are getting now monies from the feds to be able to buy more equipment. So they are part and parcel to the data gathering effort. And I do believe libraries are keeping very strict statistics on that information.
So do you think there's an opportunity with some of the funding from ARPA or Reconnect, et cetera? Or is it an outlier?
No, there's definitely, there's just not, unfortunately, there's really not a lot of money for libraries, and what is available, none of it's for infrastructure, it's all related to programming.
Oh, okay. Thank you. May I ask one question, Kevin Pisacich? mentioned a correlation with public works projects and broadband projects and ARPA funding. And then another comment earlier on was related to loan loss reserve fund. It's my understanding through government fund accounting that various government funds can loan monies to one another within a year as long as there's a payback plan. Kevin, I'm wondering if maybe you had done any of that with Oxnard, or is that a new concept which is being introduced?
There we go. George, I think for us, actually the money wasn't the problem in this case, because, we had plenty of funding from ARPA. Tranche 1 is where we're allocating money for our projects. The problem with us is, and actually I'm kind of, to get into the guts of how this works, I'm kind of breaking this up into 2 projects. The first is a design project, which I can do through a professional services agreement. And I can single source that from the vendor that's been designing the network since inception. But then when it goes to the build of that, that is a public works project. So it's got to be bid out and follow the public works bidding rules, et cetera, and get into the queue with our public works project management team, who has no less than 100 projects on their plate, with through all kinds of everything, competing with all the utilities in the city, et cetera. So it's really more of a resource contention issue than a financial one.
Kevin, not to put you on the spot, but do you guys review each public works project to see if it fits into your broadband strategy as they come?
We do. Yep. The city engineer has become one of my best friends, and we're in regular contact to make sure there's opportunities for joint trench, et cetera. And I'm finding ways to butter her up to get mine to the top of the queue, anything broadband related. So we're very tight.
That's great. And a last question for you, and again, not to put you on the spot, do you see any opportunities to collaborate with the city of Ventura as it relates to the crossover of the 101 Victoria, the Vineyard Johnson Drive area? It seems that that's a key component for your traffic signal network and also transportation corridors.
There's lots of opportunities to partner with George. Absolutely. Lots going on between, at the borders of our cities, in many different spots. So absolutely.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Appreciate it.
I want to go back to one of your first question, George, too. It is possible for government funds within an agency to borrow from each other. In fact, that was the name of the game back in development agencies were still in existence, as you generally would borrow from yourself and pay yourself back, so you're not, essentially losing interest to some outside third party.
Yeah, it seems that the DWP in LA did a lot of that when they were doing their broadband network very many years ago. And I'm wondering if those opportunities also exist between the various water projects taking place within this county and the various cities, especially, looking at that state water interconnect project, which is pending. That seems, a significant part of this middle mile network, and it creates a lot of spur opportunities between the county and the various cities. So I hope we're not overlooking that in this discussion.
No, I'll kind of share a little inside baseball, and I'll say this because I don't have a water utility here in Moore Park. It's run by the county. But I don't think in that scenario, you would generally want to have your water utility borrow money from the general fund. Rather, you would have your water utility overbuild what they want. So for example, my SCADA system at that water tank that I want to connect to my home base probably doesn't need 100 strands of fiber. Well, it doesn't need 100 strands of fiber, but it does need to communicate somehow. So I can just choose to build a big frickin' fiber conduit to connect that water tank, and anything else in between can then use it. But that is within the entire discretion of the water utility, and you could put the whole thing towards the ratepayers and then use it for other things.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And, not to hijack this time, but it seems that these discussions are things which would come out in each individual municipality's ad hoc committee, and possibly it certainly will come out, I'm sure, with Bill's discussions in the county of Santa Barbara. So again, thanks again, guys. Appreciate it. And I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving.
Jory, I just received your email and we'll pass it on to the group. It was related to the middle mile pilots, description of what those are, and we will get that distributed to everyone. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Any other last comments for the good of the order before we adjourn? 5 minutes early. Well, let's stay connected, and I appreciate everybody being here. It's been a great conversation, and we'll look forward to meeting with you one more time before the end of the year. So we may move it up a little bit, but it's going to get pretty close to the third week of December, close to the holiday, but we'll see. We'll meet one more time though. So
Thanksgiving, everybody.
all right.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Happy
Take care, everyone.
Thanksgiving. Bye-bye.
Bye.